Welcome to the Atlantum Alliance Villa. I'm Henzi Healy and I'm your host for today's podcast, and I'm joined with Gaurav. Welcome, Gaurav.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Gaurav, we've known each other for a long time because you were involved in Web3, and I mean, you still are. I shouldn't use the word were. But you have a new venture now in stem cells. Is that correct?
Not just stem cells, it's all across wellness, preventive healthcare, and precisely, let's say, focused on peptides and the global supply chain, research and medicine around it. Stem cells might come later, who knows?
So peptides are still a very gray area, and just for the public, it's pretty much a concoction based for that specific person. But what actually is a peptide?
Peptides, in short, are messages of your brain for the organs and cells to receive and act accordingly. So the car needs a steering wheel to manage the direction and everything else. Similarly, the brain is the steering wheel. It decides everything actively and passively for the body, but needs to communicate to the rest of the body. And the brain is an electrical device, while the body is a chemical device. So this transition of the electrical being of the human to the chemical being of the human is managed through peptides. Every cell, organ in the body has a peptide receiver, and the message is what it acts on.
So why do you think this is a gray area? Because peptides, I've always been a huge fan of them, and there's so many now for so many different things. But why do you think it's gray?
Peptides are not essentially the gray medicine side. Peptides are very, very popular, even on the clean medicine side. Of course, Mounjaro is very popular. Ozempic is super popular. And then these are private company products. Essentially, the peptide behind that is GLP-1. Not getting into details, but there are other open source or patent expired peptides that are extremely popular, especially in the US with the new executive order. They are not anymore in the gray area. What essentially people know about the gray side of peptides is the supply chain. Because like every other new form of medicine, and especially something that really, really works, there's a cost associated to that. The cost is of not just manufacturing, but the testing, the quality, the research around that. All of that cost compiles into the final product of one particular company that chooses to spend all this cost. But then somebody else who's just manufacturing it, or maybe not even manufacturing it, and trying to exploit this premium market of the high quality results of a particular medical substance, would want to sell their product at the premium. This product 99% of the time is not real, because anyone who's actually manufacturing high quality product would want to go through the complete supply chain of compliance, of pricing, of research, and then give it to the people. But those who are just not like-minded, of compliance, of high-quality establishments, they would want to jump through the hoop and supply it directly. Now that causes problems at many levels, and hence, anyways, these products are cheaper for people to access, and people want cheaper products. This particular segment of supply chain is gray. Peptides are not gray. They're not essentially gray. The gray markets of peptides exist. The gray market of protein, the whey protein, existed for 20 years in most of the developed countries and underdeveloped countries of the world, right? So is protein the usual, protein supplement market? Is that gray? Actually, no. I mean, protein is probably one of the most useful nutrients you can have, and some of the biggest companies and the most compliant companies are making it. But a huge market, I don't know the percentage now, is still gray, right? So I think that clears the air a bit.
So I've read some articles recently about some of the ones that you've mentioned about actually eating away at the bone matter. So I mean, is this just fake news?
I'm sorry, I didn't get
I've read articles about like some of the ones that you had mentioned previously about it actually eating away at the inner parts of the bone.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of that research or anything like that. Hasn't been featured in any larger official research. There are a lot of people who claim, obviously it's a new industry, so there are a lot of people and parties who claim independent research results, and you really can't run away with all of that. So we depend on industrial and industry leader-based researches and clinics that are established for doing such researches and publishing them. So even if there's something like that, I have to look at it before I make a comment.
But so this is an important part to touch on, because they said that anything new in the medical industry takes about 10 years before you actually start seeing the results of it, right? To really know like what effects it's causing on the body. So like in your opinion, why should people trust peptides?
They should not trust all the peptides first. Peptides is a huge category. Just to give you some numbers, your body makes more than 300,000 peptides every day, and it's just making in perpetuity, right? It's just making. Out of that, as far as my knowledge is concerned, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a science researcher, I'm just a mere investor, so don't take my numbers seriously. As far as I've read, there are more than 8,000 peptides that humans are able to synthesize in the lab, and out of them, of course, just a few have been fully regulated, right? FDA approved and whatnot. And then there was a previous FDA ban list. I mean, FDA banned some of them, which has recently been opened among the entire peptide category by the US president through an executive order. So coming back to the point, not all peptides should be tried, number one. Not all peptides are gray or white. You have to, if you're a clinician or a practitioner that has to actually distribute it, you should have to do, like, you have to do that deep research, understand the certifications. Anyone with US FDA, CGMP or GMP certifications or something similar of your country who has that is backed by the right research-based clinical organization, and is prescribing it through a medical practitioner. You see the whole loop, right? It's the complete supply chain of high quality product, high quality research and medical practice. Then only should you go for it. Guess what? Even after that, most of the peptide fall under the research grade category. So the vial would have the label of not for human and veterinary purposes, for research purpose only. And so you sign sort of a disclaimer and an agreement to be a part of the research.
So would you consider peptides a supplement of further peptides to the body, or would you consider them something that links to neurotransmitters and actually creates a certain process in the body?
Incredible question. Very good. People often fail to understand this. Peptides are intervention and intervention only. It's a medical term. Peptides are not nutrition. It is not a nutrition. Supplement so far is a generic term. So yes, it's a messaging supplement, but there was no messaging supplement. Supplements generally is used for nutritional supplements, right? So no, it's not a nutritional supplement. It's an intervention. It's a message not from the brain, but it's a message to the organ, to the cell, to whosoever you are addressing, that, hey man, you got to work. The big boy isn't giving you the right directions. Here is an intervention that gives you those directions. Act on it.
So I have a further question to this then, because that's what you said is very interesting. So, when you stimulate, like you're saying, it causes these certain parts to work, right? But then there's the whole thing of move it or lose it. So if we are stimulating these parts to work, it would then stand by reason that people would have to take these peptides forever, or that it would cause some sort of chain reaction where those receptors no longer work for themselves because they're being stimulated by something else.
Tell me you prepared well for the podcast. You're very well prepared. These are some of the sharpest questions to ask. I'm afraid this podcast will turn into a medical category conversation. Incredible question once again. So this has happened with almost every single medicine or medical intervention of the body, right? This happened with something as silly as your cough drops. half of the world got addicted to cough drops. Addiction is not a medical dependency. It's a mental dependency, right? It's a medical problem.
Yes.
I don't know if I should call it a problem. I'm not a medical practitioner. So if somebody's developing a dependence on an intervention of some sort, intervention can be my mom telling me to eat 3 times a day or 1 time a day, like every Arabic Indian moms do. That's an intervention, right? My dog wouldn't eat if I won't feed her with my hand. That's an intervention, but that's essentially a bad habit. So would you say, hey, feeding is wrong because it develops a bad habit? Not really. Peptides are almost similar. If you are under the right guidance, the right protocol as we call it, your doctor or your clinician would have made the right protocol which on-ramps you and off-ramps you off that intervention. I'm using the word intervention for a very specific purpose because I want people to understand peptides are not entirely different from medicine, although they are a lot different. But for synthetic. This particular case, yes, they're almost like medicine, but you have to be on-ramped and you have to be off-ramped. Also, your body does not operate with one peptide at a time. I told you, the body creates 300,000 peptides at a time. So you can think about it. Your body is not just producing GLP-1 to lose weight or control your glucose or whatever, right? It has many, many complementing peptides and receptors, and we will come to the later part of your question with the receptors later. So people have to understand this as a new stream of science, that it's not like, boom, you take one peptide and you're off. No, your protocol has to include multiple peptides. And the on-ramping and off-ramping, and I'm sorry, I come from finance, I'm not using the right words, and that should be a clear indication that you should not follow me on my medical suggestions on this. But this on-ramping and off-ramping is complemented with similar peptides of parallel tracks. And that can complement the habit side, that can uncomplement the habit side to get you off one type of habit or passive habit of the body. And by the time you build a new habit of this new peptide, you're already off of all types of interventions, right? So not going too deep into this has to be complemented with nutrition because, like I said, this is just intervention. This has to be complemented with exercises or whatever therapies, external therapies or interventions you need, and so on and so forth. Very important part to understand is, I told you, the brain produces peptides in very, very small supplies, and the organs are used to of receiving it. Now you are flooding your system with one type of message or a few types of messages. What happens in such cases? The receptor begins to build a contingency or a habit of high dosage. In the peptide world, this is called receptor burns or receptor track burn. Sometimes you're like finishing the whole track and your body only has a few tracks. So you don't want to do that, and that's why there's all the clinical studies largely are focused on the dosing, the patterns, and the period of every single peptide. So again, I'm repeating, this is not a medical advice, but I'm quoting clinical researches, most popular of them. Let's say some clinical researches suggest Cmax, which is a brain enhancement or a memory enhancement sort of peptide, as they claim, to be used for 10 days in a year. Now that does not mean you can't take it for the rest of the 365 days or 355 days. It's just that after that, you're getting into the zone of burning your receptors. Similar other peptides that are TB500 or BPC157 for tissue repair, they have a similar cycle of, let's say, a maximum of 6 weeks or a maximum of 18 weeks, depending on how your doctor suggests it. You have to deal with a doctor, you have to deal with an expert to make sure that your body receives the benefits now, but it's also able to function later, or else you end up self-prescribing and killing your receptors, burning your receptors. So yes, there is a big threat of self-prescription in this industry, and then eventually people end up burning their receptors, which means now the natural production of the same peptide will not influence their daily operations.
That's very interesting. And I think that's the problem nowadays, because people hear things and it's so convincing, and then they self-prescribe. Like even with dietary supplements, whatever it is. But okay, so do you think peptides could be used to treat addictions?
There are
Just based on their functioning?
There are some studies that talk about a lot of peptides treating a lot of addictions. As a matter of fact, one thing that I can actually talk about, I don't know my legal limits, but something that is FDA approved almost everywhere in the world and in UAE is GLP-1, so Mounjaro, and an upcoming version of Mounjaro that isn't yet approved is retatrutide. But all these peptides have like 30% of their function is addiction removal, because they function on your satiety center. Satiety center is the part of the brain that actually works on sequential or repetitive cycles of any habit. You know what's your biggest habit? Our ancestors were roaming around in farms, in forests and sands and desert, barely eating once in 7 days or 4 days, right? You know that, right? In the forest, our ancestors would barely get food, like getting 3 meals a day.
So we're overeating.
We are overeating, and because that sits in the most core part of our subconscious, everybody is exposed to this or is vulnerable to this habit of overeating. I mean, who doesn't overeat? Who doesn't want to overeat, right? So if you finally have this magic drug or this magic molecule, I don't like calling them drugs, that directly controls your satiety center and tells it to stop. Done. So hundreds of thousands of patients on Mounjaro, basically GLP-1 drugs, I shouldn't name a brand, have reported dismissal of habits, eating habits, drinking habits, sometimes even nicotine, tea, coffee, just as a function of that peptide. And then we're getting into all those other drugs that are non-FDA approved and non-approved, so let's not talk about them. But yes, it works on habits a lot.
And so you called, you've referred to peptides as intervention, right? But then at the beginning of the podcast, you also said that you're focused on preventative health. So if these are intervention, are they also part of the preventative health, and how do you see that?
I don't see these two things coinciding.
Fine.
They can both be the same.
Sure.
An intervention for future health is intervention for preventive healthcare. The reason I'm bullish on this is rather personal, like every other person has for whatever they do in business. I've always stayed away from medicine. I barely have recorded instances of even taking a fever medicine like ibuprofen.
Advil or something.
Right? You call it Combiflame in Asia, you call it Motrin in US. Up until 2 years ago, I wouldn't even take external protein, right? So I was raised in this natural environment, and that every external intervention is bad. And I'm still that guy, by the way. But the
old habits die hard.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
So yeah, research. I try to not be an idealist. I try to be a research-driven, science-driven person. And so when I started learning about peptides being a part of my body, not a steroid, not an external chemical. In fact, this category of substances are called bioidentical substances. So they are bioidentical at the molecular level. So the GLP-1, or let's say the combined molecular weight of something closer to Mounjaro would be 1346 DA molecular weight. My body produces exactly the same, right? So first of all, I don't have a problem if it's exactly like my body. 2, I do understand the fact that my brain is fried like everyone else. I am exposed to this world of information. I'm watching my Insta, Twitter, LinkedIn. I mean, I don't do this as much, but WhatsApp, and there's this innate pressure of responding to everybody in 1 second, or you're rude, and then traveling, and so much more that my ancestors, leave the ancestors, my mother didn't had that pressure. So we're living in this explosion of information, and the brain has to deal with all of that, and so the brain definitely can underperform. And in that case, if my body is telling me to act on a few things, and my organs are capable to act on it, it's just the matter of a messaging. It's like I have a Chinese friend or an American friend that speaks a language I don't, and I want something done through their skills. All I need to do is communicate, right? So I agree with peptides and this as an intervention to preventive healthcare or even cure of an active disease, because I think science says so, that I'm simply communicating to my organs to take care of what they should be doing already.
So have you tried any yet?
A lot.
Yeah? Which ones have you tried?
I mean, you have to take care of the medical side of it, legal side of it. I have done a retatrutide prescription for for 1 month in a microdose.
Yeah.
So obviously I didn't have to lose weight. I was doing pretty well with my BMI. But this is the beauty of peptides. It's not the science of medicine. It's the science of your body. So dosing switches the use cases. Yeah. It is insane. So while retatrutide is used for sugar control, like diabetic control and weight loss control, there's also one more use case of it, which is if you take microdosing of the same, it heals your digestive system. It's called a metabolic reset. And the recent test results, the last test results published, talk about retatrutide treating more than 60% liver fat.
Wow.
So 60%.
Wow. And liver fat, usually once the fat is there, it was like,
You're talking about Asians. We're all like from the Asia continent. Yeah. We all have liver fat problems.
And usually you wouldn't have a cure or a solution for that. Yeah. That's incredible.
This is incredible. I am talking about treating my digestive system problems that have existed for the last 17 years.
Exactly.
Actually more, 18 years. Right? It was probably the biggest gift I've got from Cosmos in the recent years.
Amazing.
Right? And then I did something, now that I'm in longevity, so I have this, pressure from the industry to talk about my telomere length and my biological age. So the first thing I had to do, having committed myself to this industry for 20 years, is take care of my biological clock. So there is a peptide called Apitelon that does something about it. Okay. Again, I'm not a doctor. These are the prescriptions that I've taken. That you took, yeah. So I've taken these prescriptions. Lastly, I've always been a stunt biker, a motorbiker, since my school days, college days. So all my joints have been broken multiple times. None of the skin is real. So I always had my knee at the verge of a replacement of whatnot. And during a nominal sports event, I had a major injury 3 months ago. Oh, wow. So I had to, again, I told you I don't take medicine. Yeah. And the doctor suggested me something in that, and I chose to go for peptides. And I'm running again. Wow. I'm super well.
There we go.
Yeah, and my entire family is on one of the other prescription right now: weight loss, sugar control, joint pain. This is like every single family has that, let alone people. I mean, we're blessed, you and me, and people around us, to be fit enough, but the rest of the world is not as fit.
Of course.
They're dealing with a ton of problems.
Yeah.
And so if you can gift them health, it can't be anything better than that. Talking about something you mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, money.
Yes. Did I mention money?
You did.
Oh.
Thank God this is recorded. Since COVID, the world has woke up to wellness. The industry has gone from a few $1 million to a few $1 trillion in a straight curve. And companies like Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk that have produced one molecule in peptides, Ozempic and Mounjaro, have reported billions. Like the last quarter report of just Mounjaro, if you can imagine, is approaching 20 billion, 18.9 as I read in the report yesterday. Can you beat it? Like one molecule. Yeah. And you're talking about a stream that has 8,000 identified molecules. You know where we're going? And then every single conversation I have these days about my Web3 side, about my investments, my portfolio companies, you name it, my taxi driver. By the time I end up a 5-minute conversation, we're talking about wellness. He's talking about one of the other chronic problem he has or she has or the family has, and I tell them to talk to this doctor or that clinic and ask them about peptides. And like 3 days later, I have a thank you letter just by the research they did on internet. So I am particularly excited about the future of mankind, if anything else.
That's great. I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Gaurav.
Thank you for having me. This was incredible. And again, praise your research on the topic. Those are very, very sharp questions.
Amazing. Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you.